Welcome back, friends. It's almost time for school to start. Don't judge me. So today, as part of that, we are going to read The Fun They Had by Isaac Asimov. Margie even wrote about it that night in her diary. On the page headed May 17th, 2155, she wrote, "Today Tommy found a real book." It was a very old book. Margie's grandfather once said that when he was a little boy, his grandfather told him there was a time all stories were printed on paper. They turned the pages, which were yellow and crinkly, and it was awfully funny to read words that stood still instead of moving the way they were supposed to, on a screen, you know. And then, when they turned back to the page before, it had the same words on it that it had when they read it the first time. "Gee," said Tommy, "what a waste. When you're through with the book, you just throw it away, I guess. Our television screen must have had 1,000,000 books on it, and it's good for plenty more. I wouldn't throw it away." "Same with mine," said Margie. She was 11 and hadn't seen as many telebooks as Tommy had. He was 13. She said, "Where did you find it?" "In my house," he pointed, without looking, because he was busy reading. "In the attic." "What's it about?" "School." Margie was scornful. "School? What's there to write about school? I hate school." Margie always hated school, but now she hated it more than ever. The mechanical teacher had been giving her test after test in geography, and she had been doing worse and worse until her mother had shaken her head sorrowfully and sent for the county inspector. He was a round little man with a red face and a whole box of tools with dials and wires. He smiled at her and gave her an apple, then took the teacher apart. Margie had hoped he wouldn't know how to put it together again, but he knew how all right, and after an hour or so, there he was again. Large and black and ugly, with a big screen on which all the lessons were shown and the questions were asked. That wasn't so bad. The part she hated most was the slot where she had to put the homework and test papers. She always had to write them out in a punch code they made her learn when she was 6 years old, and the mechanical teacher calculated the mark in no time. The inspector had smiled after he was finished and patted her head. He said to her mother, "It's not the little girl's fault, Mrs. Jones. I think the geography sector was geared a little too quick. Those things happen sometimes. I've slowed it up to an average 10-year level. Actually, the overall pattern of her progress is quite satisfactory." And he patted Margie's head again. Margie was disappointed. She had been hoping they would take the teacher away altogether. They had once taken Tommy's teacher away for nearly a month because the history sector had blanked out completely. So she said to Tommy, "Why would anyone write about school?" Tommy looked at her with very superior eyes. "Because it's not our kind of school, stupid. This is the old kind of school that they had hundreds of years ago," he added loftily, pronouncing the word carefully. "Centuries ago." Margie was hurt. "Well, I don't know what kind of school they had all that time ago." She read the book over his shoulder for a while, then said, "Anyway, they had a regular teacher." "Sure they had a teacher, but it wasn't a regular teacher. It was a man." "A man? How could a man be a teacher?" "Well, you just told the boys and girls things and gave them homework and asked them questions." "A man isn't smart enough." "Sure he is. My father knows as much as my teacher." "He can't. A man can't know as much as a teacher." "Knows about as much, I betcha." Margie wasn't prepared to dispute that. She said, "I wouldn't want a strange man in my house to teach me." Tommy screamed with laughter. "You don't know much, Margie. The teachers didn't live in the house. They had a special building and all the kids went there." "And all the kids learned the same thing?" "Sure, if they were the same age." "But my mother says a teacher has to be adjusted to fit the mind of each boy and girl it teaches, and that each kid has to be taught differently." "Just the same, they didn't do it that way then. If you don't like it, you don't have to read the book." "I didn't say I didn't like it," Margie said quickly. She wanted to read about those funny schools. They weren't even half finished when Margie's mother called, "Margie, school!" Margie looked up. "Not yet, Mama." "Now," said Mrs. Jones, "and it's probably time for Tommy, too." Margie said to Tommy, "Can I read the book some more with you after school?" "Maybe," he said nonchalantly. He walked away whistling, the dusty old book tucked beneath his arm. Margie went back to the schoolroom. It was right next to her bedroom, and the mechanical teacher was on and waiting for her. It was always on at the same time every day except Saturday and Sunday, because her mother said little girls learned better if they learned at regular hours. The screen was lit up, and it said, "Today's arithmetic lesson is on the addition of proper fractions. Please insert yesterday's homework in the proper slot." Margie did so with a sigh. She was thinking about the old schools they had when her grandfather's grandfather was a little boy. All the kids from the whole neighborhood came, laughing and shouting in the schoolyard, sitting together in the schoolroom, going home together at the end of the day. They learned the same things so they could help one another on the homework and talk about it. And the teachers were people. The mechanical teacher was flashing on the screen. When we add the fractions 1/2 and 1/4, Margie was thinking about how the kids must have loved it in the old days. She was thinking about the fun they had. The end. So, believe it or not, Isaac Asimov's most well known for speculative sci-fi, not reality, or like prognostication or whatever. He's not Nostradamus. He is known as one of the, he wasn't one of the originators of sci-fi. That was actually Mary Shelley, but he's called one of the big three with Heinlein and Arthur Clarke, and he really did a lot of formative work on how sci-fi looks today. He's the one who invented the 3 rules of robotics. You shall not harm a human, or by inaction cause a human to come to harm.
Now, I've seen your commercials, but doesn't the second law state that a robot has to obey any order given by a human being?
I don't know why I'm doing the robot as I'm saying that. He wrote hundreds of short stories. He wrote a whole lot of books. The 3 Rules of Robotics is from one of his more famous novels, I, Robot. And I actually didn't know this until I started researching him for the purposes of this end video thing, because I wanted to do the story, but I didn't he actually died of AIDS. He had a heart attack in the 80s and he needed a blood transfusion, and apparently it happened within days of when Arthur Ashe died. And they kind of publicly said, Arthur Ashe has died tragically of AIDS after a blood transfusion stemming from a heart attack. And so his family saw the backlash of that happening and they were like, we better not mention that. And it's kind of interesting to think about how he changed the future of the future, and yet his cause of death had to be unknown for the backlash in the present. The Fun They Had was initially published in 1951 in a kids' newspaper called, I think, the Boys and Girls Page. Side note, backstory, whatever. This particular book is actually one that my grandmother used when she was teaching high school. She retired in 1982. So I read this. I've been reading this particular book. There are just a whole lot of stories that are really good for that age bracket of like late middle school to high school. And this is one of them. And when I was younger, I used to think it was like, oh yes, it's such a great work of speculative fiction. And now it's very, very like, God, I'm just gonna need to lay it down for a second, please. When you read it, you can see that it's meant for kids. Like, it's not, the vocabulary isn't incredibly elevated, but it's still kind of a sophisticated work of speculative fiction. It addresses a lot of the questions that kids would have, that a lot of questions that people in general would have about if you were suddenly transported into the future, like what would school look like? Or if you wanted to look into the past, what would school look like? And it's just kind of funny that he kind of nailed what school looks like now for a lot of us. Like last year, my kids, both of them did full digital all year. They had a real teacher, but the real teacher came at them from their telescreen, and they read they didn't have access to the library. All of the books that they had checked out were for digital, and they have tablets and Kindles that they can download books to. They did have some like malfunctioning, like, oh yeah, I'm sorry, the form wasn't correct that we used for this one test, so we have to redo it and recalibrate it and all that kind of thing. I just wanted to read this story because it's just kind of a very poignant intersection of where we all kind of are now. If you are in school, if you are a parent sending your child to school with like 24 glue sticks, why do glue sticks come in like 8 million packs? I don't know, but we're sending them. It's very scary in a lot of ways, and I felt like if I am sad, then I can't be anxious. So I thought that this might be a good pick for the beginning of the school year. Let me know down in the comments how you are doing school this year. And while you're down there, you might as well like the video if you liked it and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss another story. I'll be back on Monday. See you guys next time.